All right, good evening again, everyone, and welcome to OTF Connects, presenting Kathy Griffin in Math, Where Do I Begin, Part 1 in Planning. I'm Colin Jago, I'm your moderator. Let me know at any point if I can help you with anything or if you need anything. Looking at the map here, and we just did this together, we've got people from all over the place tonight. We've got a nice big group tonight, so there's lots of energy in the room. It's going to be a lot of fun, I think. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. And Kathy, I know you're going to introduce yourself, so I'm going to get out of the way now. If you need anything, let me know. Otherwise, Kathy, it is yours to take away.
Okay, thank you very much, Colin. So my name is Kathy Griffin, and I'm from about 2 hours north of Toronto in Grey County. And I have been saying I've been teaching for about 15 years now for maybe 3 years. So I guess it's up to 18 or 19 years I've been teaching. I started my career in New Zealand, and I taught in BC, Alberta, and I've been back in Ontario for a while now. And I've been a learning resource teacher at my school for the last 2 years. But before that, I taught for quite a while in grade 4 to 8, 4 to 7 actually. And 3 years ago, I led a TLLP, a Teacher Leadership Learning Project, on math for some teachers at my school. And it went really well. So we applied for some more funding, and we got provincial knowledge exchange funding. So I have continued to work collaboratively with my group and some extended groups of people to keep working on basically offering teacher-led professional development. So we started with 4, then went to 16, and then to 33 teachers working on their own projects. Quite a few of which were on math, and at my school now we've just begun some more math inquiries this year, and I'm facilitating 2 of those. So that's kind of where my math background comes from. So I have some goals, some intentions for this session tonight. I'm hoping that we're going to start with taking a look at the curriculum and the concepts particularly in measurement tonight, because that's what my one research group is working on right now. And we're going to look at some resources and how we develop an understanding of some of the concepts and how we go about doing some planning for rich learning for students. So I'm not going to be able to give you, everything maybe you want to the idea of where do I start with math, but rather some jumping off points. And at the end, I want to come back to maybe how you can encourage student voice to enter into your planning, and how you might take on sort of the stance of an action researcher in improving your practice and for your students as well. So it becomes research for you and your students together, including a lot of self-reflection. I'm hoping that what I present is authentic. It sounds like it's coming from teachers by teachers, and I think that's really amazing. Amazing part of these OTF series is that it's by teachers for teachers, and it's not someone that is presenting something that they're really removed from. So I'd like your feedback on that at the end to see how I've done. Now I'm going to start with finding out a little bit about who you are. And while we're going through the next few slides, I'd like you to think about what you want out of this session. And at any point, if there's something you think you want particularly, like why did you pick this one in particular, could you put it in the chat box while we go through the next couple of activities here. So basically I want to know, I know I geared this towards junior teachers and it said that in the blurb, but I'd love to know what you teach. And I put the K to 3, obviously 4, 5, 6, I'm assuming quite a few of you teach that, but is there anybody who teaches above that or has a split? So you might enter 2 with a split class as well as say grade 5 and grade 4, whatever. But if you could just pick an icon from the clip art and just place it in one of the categories there. I'd love to see what grades you are in. So I'm seeing while you're doing this some of the resources or ideas that you want to get out of today. So there are a lot of people on the OT list, which is, thank you for putting that. I should have put that column in, I'm sorry. That's good to see what you want out of this. Going back into the classroom from Z, Crystal, I'm looking for some new ideas, okay. Looking for some resources to use in the classroom. Okay, new teacher. I found the last time I did one of these last year, there were a lot of new teachers coming in. So that's great. I hope everybody got on there. I'm going to go to the next slide to see how long have you been teaching. So some of you, you're on the OT list. Some of you new teachers. Could you just give me an idea here on this line, how long you've been teaching? So I know if I'm considering where I am, I'm probably closer to the right-hand side there. Great. So quite a variety. Good to know. And then still seeing some people put their numbers in on the left-hand side, 6 years, 5 years, et cetera, et cetera. Great. Okay. So my next question is, next two are really about your comfort level with a few of the things that I'll be touching upon. So I'm not, I need to know if I need to explain some of these things. So if you're familiar with the three-part lesson plan, and what I mean by that, if you're not, you might be saying on the what's that, is the mind's on, providing a problem for students and then following up with a consolidation. And there are variations on this. Sometimes, you're going to be doing mini lessons in there and that sort of thing, but in general, that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a three-part lesson plan. Okay, so quite a bit of knowledge, which is great. I think that's a big change from even 5 years ago. Okay, so then the last one here is, do you know what I mean by rich, open-ended parallel problems? Are you confident you know what those mean? You've not heard them before? And as you fill this in, I'm going to just explain for some people who maybe don't know. Rich problems are problems that are going to engage your students for an extended period of time and have some context to them that's probably relevant to the real world and to their experience. An open-ended problem is a problem that doesn't just have one answer. So there might be multiple ways of answering the questions, or it could be many strategies for answering the question. And finally, parallel problems are problems that you could, say, put up on the board. One might have easier numbers, more difficult numbers. One might be an extension. You might have 3 or more, but to provide multiple entry points for different students. And you might use parallel problems in a split class where you've got grade 4s working on one sort of, it's maybe the same concept as the grade 5s, but the problem's going to look different because of the curriculum for each grade. Okay, so we're going to come back to those as we keep going. Thanks for that. That gives me some ideas of where to go with explaining things. Okay, so where do you start when you're planning a unit for math? You can answer in the chat. You can write something on the sheet there. What resources do you use? What are your go-tos? If you're going to start a math unit, where would you go? So Crystal said curriculum documents, Pinterest, curriculum, ditto. Always start with the curriculum. Math makes sense. Got all sorts of ideas here. The guide, I'm assuming you're doing either a teacher guide for a textbook, or probably that's what you mean. So there's all sorts of different things that people are talking. I like the idea of backward planning, starting with the end in mind of where you're going. I see Vanderwall, Math Makes Sense, Number Talks, Marion Small. Good, okay. So I like the idea here. Some people are talking about activating kids' prior knowledge, that sort of thing, trying to figure out what your students know before you get started. And what I'm going to start with right now is starting with the curriculum, but paired in with that, I think you've got to include the diagnostic that you're talking about and activating, finding out what the kids know, where are they starting from. I think that's really important. So that has to be hand in hand with taking a look at the curriculum. So the first activity that I want to take a look at is actually picking a grade. If you can pick whichever grade you want, but I would recommend for what we're talking about here, going from grade 3 to 7. And I want you to focus on measurement strand and on specifically area and perimeter. And what I would like you to do, I'm going to ask Colin to put a link to the curriculum there. If you have a curriculum document with you, that's fine. But if Colin, if you could put the link, the website link into the chat or wherever you put it, that would be great. And thank you, Colin. You could go there and take a look. And I want you to focus on the questions that are on this sheet here when you take a look at it. I want you to, you don't have to actually make notes, but make note of what do students need to know and what do they need to be able to do. And we're going to take a look at how that changes in the next few slides. So we're going to take a look at the curriculum from 3 to 6 and see what are some of the things that change for area and perimeter. Take a look too at what are the big ideas or the concepts or big understandings for the grade you're looking at. And do you see a connection to any other strand? Okay, so I'd like to give you 5 minutes or so to go to that link if you can and take a look at the curriculum for one of the areas. You'll notice, and hopefully you're heading there now, I'm going to talk for a bit, but when you go to the curriculum for any measurement strand, there's 2 areas. There's attributes, units, and measurement sense, and then there's a second area which is measurement relationships. Okay, so there's 2 different sections, and if you just scan through one of the pages, one of the grades, just take a look for those things, just for area and perimeter. And I'm just going to turn my mic off for a minute and give you a few minutes to work on that. So Connie, just above where you wrote, there should be a blue link for the www.edu.gov.on.ca. If you just Google the Ontario Math.
Yeah, do you not see that link right above where you typed in the chat box there, Connie? There's I posted it. There's just a blue highlighted link. If you click that, it should open up in a browser for you.
Could you perhaps just show me with your little voting tool a green check mark if you have managed to access the curriculum?
Okay. So Connie, have you had any luck?
Great, thanks. Okay.
I'm not seeing any conversations in this box. Even my text has disappeared. Oh my, that's weird. I've not heard of that before, Connie. I'm sorry.
One thing I found, Colin, I had dragged my chat over to the left-hand side, and then I couldn't write in it, so I pulled it back onto the main screen and dropped it in. And then when I pulled it back out again, I had access. So I don't know if Connie...
Had you moved your box around, Connie? Had you moved your text box, or was it right where it was when you started? Just while we're trying to sort out Connie and people are looking at the curriculum, I don't know if you noticed, Kathy, I did put a 5-minute timer up there, so that'll beep when that's done. No, just doing it now to play around with it. Okay, well, here, Connie, see if you see that. There's the link again. Did that show up for you if you just click that? Really? So you're not seeing anybody else's thing, like I just put it in there. That is so weird.
Connie, can you get to another window just to search for the Ontario Math curriculum? If you can't, don't worry, because in 2 minutes we're just, okay, good.
Yeah. I don't know. The only thing I can suggest, Connie, is if you really want to get into the chat, is maybe like close it down and try coming back in, like starting it up again. Sometimes that works, but if it's not that big a deal and you're just okay to listen, then I guess you can do that. It's totally up to you. I was really sorry about that. I've not seen that before. I did that. Oh, well, good for you. Very bizarre. I'm gonna turn off my mic. I'm gonna do a little bit of digging and see what I can find.
Good, Connie. So if you had a chance to look at one grade and you want to just take a look at the next grade, up or down, just to see what's different or similar for area and perimeter, you can do that. Kristen, I don't know if you were here before and left and came back, but if you do have access to a curriculum, we're just taking a look at the measurement strand, particularly area and perimeter for grades 3 to 7. People are starting with one grade and just taking a look at what students need to know and do, and if they have time, comparing that across to another grade. That's okay. Okay.
Thank you, Kristen. I totally bet that's it. Connie, did you see what Kristen asked? I bet you've got just the box minimized. If you click by where it says chat supervisors an arrow, is that pointing to the right or is it pointing down? And if it's pointing to the right, click it so that it points down. I bet that's what it was. It never even occurred to me. Thank you, Kristen. You have great minds in the room. You can solve problems. Try that, Connie. All right, there's our timer. Beautiful.
Great.
Thanks so much, Kristen.
So I know a lot of you put that you start with the curriculum in the chat box. It's not something that when I started teaching that I necessarily did all the time. I started in a big school that had grade five classes, and I was given a binder of all the handouts and everything that I needed to go through for the year in math. And it took me a while to figure out that they didn't necessarily always match the curriculum, and probably a lot of you know that our textbooks don't necessarily match the curriculum, but different textbooks might have, 25% of their content not even in the Ontario curriculum. So I always start any unit, even if I've taught it before, by going back to the curriculum and not just taking a look at my grade, but taking a look at the continuum so that I can meet the needs of students that maybe aren't at a certain conceptual grade level yet, and I can help move them up to the grade they need to be at, and actually also push the people who need to go further. So if we take a look at grade 3, I've just summarized a few of the things in grade 3. And when I usually do a curriculum sort, I usually try and separate what the kids need to be able to do, like estimate, measure, and record the perimeter. And there's usually something here for compare, order, those sorts of things. And I'm trying to figure out if I can get a different color here. Yep. From the things that they need to know. So they need to know what perimeter is, what standard units are. They need to be able to know what area is, and they need to know different shapes. So try and I'm not going to do that for every one of these right now, but it's a good practice to try and take a look, okay, what do they need to be able to do? What do they need to know? And often, for me anyway, the things that they need to be able to do, sometimes you can just present the things they need to know and not do as much on what they need to be able to do. So I find it very useful to compare like that. One thing is that when you get to grade 3, if any of you taught primary, this is the first year where standardized units really become a mainstay. So for perimeter and area, you're taking a look at standardized unit, but even for area, it's on a grid or with manipulatives. It's not using any sort of length times width equals however many centimeters squared. It's all physical, okay? And there's a lot of comparing and ordering shapes by area. By the time we get to grade 4, you've still got the estimate, measure, and record area and perimeter. And it's still, and I think this is really, really important, it's still using a variety of tools. Okay, so, and I'm just trying to, sorry, I've got too many things open here. I think this, I know I've highlighted the variety of tools. I think that's really important because even in grade 4, students are not expected to be able to use a standard algorithm like area equals length times width. It's okay for them, they can succeed at grade 4 level if they can create a rectangle, say, on grid paper and count up the squares, okay? And I'm going to come back to that idea of counting up the squares in a minute because we can take a look at how that compares to the multiplication number sense expectations. But they do need to select and justify the most appropriate standard unit, and that select and justify the most appropriate standard unit stays in the curriculum from grade 4 on. And we start to get into this determining through investigation the relationship between side length of a rectangle and its perimeter and area. But they still do not need to know the standard algorithm. And Shawnee, you mentioned the open array model. Exactly. We're going to come back to that. Again, you've got it right on the nose there. And there are different textbooks, Aisha, that do have much more better coverage of different areas. It's just, I think you have to come back to curriculum just to make sure that they do. There's great problems in a variety of textbooks, but just you have to be careful that you're not just following it right the way through because of you can't cover it all, and it's not all in the curriculum. Okay, so going on to grade 5. You've still got the estimate, measure, perimeter, and area. You've got different kinds of polygons coming through. You're still using a variety of tools. But if you shift down to the bottom expectation there, that you're determining through investigation that relationship again between length and area, side length, area, and perimeter. And you're starting to generalize and develop the formulas for perimeter and area. And you're right, and the textbooks are a tool and not the program exactly. So you've got in the middle there still select and justify the most appropriate standard units, and there's a little bit more creating shapes with the same area and perimeter. You can start to see some problems that you might develop from these expectations. So moving up to grade 6, still got the measuring the perimeter and area, irregular and irregular. Given an area or perimeter, construct the rectangle, square, parallelogram. So you've actually got the constructing in there for the first time. And finally, you've got determining the relationship between side length and area and perimeter to then generalize and develop the formulas for parallelograms and triangles, not just rectangles. Okay. So knowing that there are this kind of the shift in the curriculum, the important concepts that come out of this are the importance of estimating, selecting and justifying units, comparing, and what I didn't put in there that is in the curriculum is converting units. And the last two things we're going to focus on today are the relationships between the length and the area and perimeter and that investigation. So what are we going to use to find some problems and some activities to get at these last two things? I'm just going to go back to that for a second, to the relationships and the investigating. There's a lot of problems that you can start with from textbooks. There's a lot of things like that. I have some resources that I really like to use. The top one there is the Marion Small one, Making Math Meaningful to Canadian Students, Kindergarten to Grade 8. It's a huge book. It's very expensive, but you might have it in your school board, or you might have something by Vanderwall that's a very similar sort of textbook that basically goes through the continuum for each strand and what manipulatives you might use and some tips for teaching and that sort of thing. You've also got your guides to effective instruction, which are very much like the Vanderwall or this Making Math Meaningful to Canadian Students, in that it kind of goes through the concepts behind the curriculum, okay? And that it gives you the understanding of what it is in the curriculum that you need to teach. Because I know that when I went through, I didn't learn how to come up with the formulas myself. I was given the formulas to do. So these top two ones really give you the background, okay? So the Making Math Meaningful is good. Thank you, Colin. Put a link to it in there, and the author is Marion Small, okay? The Guide to Effective Instruction, there's going to be a link to one of them coming up, but those are all available online if you Google them in PDFs, okay? And Kayleen may have the same issue with the top chat, with the arrow, changing the arrow down or bringing it so that she can see more of the chat so she can find the link. But if you don't find it here, it will be provided on the OTF site as well at the end. There are lots of different textbooks that have good questions for math teaching. I've put one of my favorite ones here, Good Questions for Math Teaching, okay? And there's one that's 5 to 8, but there's also one that's K to 5, okay? So when I worked with a group, it was just, what's today? It was on Monday. It was at my school, which is Osprey School. We went through a whole bunch of those resources to find the problems that would support that curriculum, okay? And those 3 books that you saw, if you go to the link that Colin is going to put in, there's a couple of places you could go to see an Excel document with a whole lot of problems that the group that I was working with found in Guide to Effective Instruction, in the Marion Small books, in the curriculum. And we put it in an Excel document so you could sort it by grade. And we also put a column to say what curriculum strand or what big concept we would be looking at with the problem. And I'd like you to take a look at this resource, and you can start with the grade you teach, and you can move up and down if you want. And I want you to take a look at the problems to see, are there any of the problems that could be modified to another grade? Do you see any patterns in the questions? Do the questions, do you think, reflect the important concepts that we just looked at that are in the curriculum? Is there anything missing? And there's 3 options for seeing the file. One of them is the SharePoint one that Colin has just put in the chat box. There's one that's a Google document, and then there's one, if you can't get either of those, that is just, I believe, an Excel document on the OTF site. I'm hoping you can get into it. And there's a third, like there's the column with the grade, there's a column with the problem, a column with the concept that the question is looking at, and then there's a comment box. And if you're welcome on these, either of the 2 documents there, to add your comments as you go. If you see a way to modify the problem to go to a different grade, if you disagree with something, or the grade level that it's been put at. But I want you to take a look, because this is a resource that you're welcome to use. Again, the 3 books that we or I think there are 4 books that we use to find the questions, they're listed at the bottom of the page if you want to know who the authors were and the titles of the text. And I'm going to give you, again, if Colin could set the timer, 5 minutes just to take a look at this resource and make your comments. And do let us know if you're having any trouble accessing the documents.
Yeah, so hopefully I put 2 links there. Hopefully either the Excel one, which is that first link, or the Google one works for people, just so they can at least take a look. Oh shoot, Nick can't copy them. So maybe people let me know in the chat. Give me a green thumbs up if you've managed to get some of those files, just to at least peruse them. So we got a couple of green check marks. Okay.
I'm wondering about, Colin, could we maybe do it live?
That's the other thing we can do, is we can pull up. Now, do you want to try, because we can do like an application sharing and then share a screen. Do you know how to do that? Okay. I can do it, or I can walk you through it.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead and do it? I know that idea, but I'm having trouble copying. Yeah.
That's okay. I want to just give me a second here. I think I have to move this over here. All right, so start sharing. Google Chrome. There's my email. There, this is the one. This is the one. Can you see it now? Kathy, do you see it?
If you can't access, yeah,
okay.
I see it. Okay, so I can just talk through this, and am I able to move up and down? Okay.
That's so a good question. Because it's in my browser, I probably have to move it. So you directly what you want me to do.
So if you can move over so we can see the far left column. Right now I can see column B, but not A. Okay, so basically what we done here, you can see that the grade 4 problem, and hopefully people that are accessing it themselves can just tune out my voice here. But for grade 4, the first problem is taken from the Guide to Effective Instruction Measurement, and it's on pages 55 to 66. And it's a series of questions and problems around the context of setting up designing a kindergarten play enclosure and using an actual real-life play space outside to do some estimating, and with a set perimeter, design several areas, et cetera, et cetera. So you can read through a few of those. And you won't be able to comment, but you could perhaps comment in the sidebar, and we'll leave it on grade 4 for maybe a minute, and then if you don't mind, Colin, just scanning down a bit so they can see some of the grade 5 ones. So again, if you're on one of the Google ones or the one that's in OneDrive, if you could make any comments in the comment section, feel free. It's totally anonymous. Okay, so just taking a look at the window, and I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback from somewhere, Colin. Is that my issue, or?
Oh, no, you know what? That might be me. Hang on.
Okay.
Yeah, you know what? I apologize. I've got my microphone open here, and I probably shouldn't have had that. So I will get rid of that, and then I will stop the sharing now too.
Okay. So basically, this was a way that we could take a look at the resources quickly. We had 5 people going through a whole bunch of books, putting all of these questions in a database where we could have, or an Excel document where we could have access to them and quickly see, okay, what are the big concepts that are in these questions, so that we can take a look. I'm just going to move you back here for a second, so we can take a look at these important concepts. And even that first one that okay, good, the echo's gone. Okay, even that first problem, which is in the kindergarten context, if you really go through and read that whole problem that's set out for you in the Guide to Effective Instruction, it has some areas in it that each time I go back to it, I can focus on in a different way. So making sure that I'm using that selecting and justifying units with the kids, that we're using real life measuring that could be a real problem, that we're comparing different possible solutions and starting to investigate the relationships between the side lengths and area and that sort of thing. So feedback from you guys. The questions I asked, do you see some of the questions reflecting the concepts? Do you see that this kind of resource is useful? Do you see where there are some questions that could be modified that are maybe written at a grade 4 level that could be modified to be a different grade? That sort of thing. If you want to write anything in here, you can. If you want to write it in the chat box, that's okay. I'm seeing some check marks that people find it okay. Useful, that's good. Couldn't type in the document, okay. Niru, do you want to turn on your microphone and talk?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Do you want to go ahead? Do you have a question?
How can I type it on the whiteboard?
How can you type on the whiteboard? Okay, there's a couple of options, and Colin, you can come in if you want, but there's an A that if you click on the A, you should be able to then move over and click on the whiteboard, and it gives you a text box.
I don't see any A around here.
So there should be, yeah, go ahead, Colin.
Yeah, no, beside the whiteboard, on the left-hand side of the whiteboard, there's a tall, thin strip with a bunch of different buttons on it, arrows and whatnot. And the fourth button down on that tall, thin strip has the letter A. It might either be a big A or like a little tiny A with lines beside it for a big text box or a little text box. And then you select one of those and then click into the whiteboard.
I'm on an iPad, so I just see.
Oh, I'm sorry. If you're on an iPad, that tool doesn't work. I apologize. Yeah. I didn't realize that you were on an iPad. Sorry,
exactly.
you cannot type on the whiteboard with an iPad. I'm sorry.
All right. And would you be able to share the Google Docs on our Google Drive?
Yes.
Yeah. I can tell you. Yeah, those will all be posted on the OTF website later tonight. And when you get the email tomorrow, you'll have access to all of those resources.
Okay. No problem. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I did see these resources. They are really, really great. And I'm also using one of the websites. I teach grade 8 math. So I'm using Tap into Teens' Minds, and it gives you a short video and a 3-part lesson plan on which you can, the kids actually formulate the questions based on what they see.
Awesome.
And later on you unfold the problem, and it is all related to the real life scenarios.
Are you able to type that resource into the chat box for us?
Yes, I'm going to.
Thank you. And if anyone else has other resources that are great suggestions for us to see, we certainly, our group would be glad to use them too. And as you can see, we did have a grade 7 and 8 teacher join us on this activity. So I'm seeing a lot more coming in here. Dan Meyer is a good person to check out for 3-part math lessons. Great. Tap into teens. Okay. So I'm sorry you couldn't type into the document. That's okay. And it's good to see that you can see where some of the questions could be modified. And I recognize the worry here. I'm cautious because I'm worried about repeating other grades' work or going too far. And that's something that we work on as a team in our school. Now, we're a very small school. We've got basically one teacher almost at each grade level, sometimes 1.5, like the split grades. But we try and coordinate and work together so that even if we're repeating a question, we change the context for the kids so that, they're able to access it and use this, work on a similar concept and keep working up a grade level sort of in their strategies. So what we're going to be moving on to next is actually looking at a problem and taking a look at, let's say you're using one problem with kids that are either at different levels or kids that are at, in a split grade, or you have some students that are working on modified curriculum or accelerated, that sort of thing. How can you, could you use one problem for all kids, or how could you modify the problem? I really appreciate all your feedback on the layout. We certainly found the layout very useful so that we could easily sort, and we can download this, and if you sort it online, it sorts for everybody, but you could download a copy and sort it the way you want to, either by the concept or by the grade. Okay, so I'm going to stop you here for a second if you're writing anything on the page, and just go to the next one. I've chosen one of the questions that, if you go back to that resource, it's actually laid out as a 3-part with a minds on and then a consolidation piece. But I want you to just take a look at this question, and if you have a piece of paper, pencil, I just want to do it in your head if you don't have anything to write down on, or on your computer on a separate page. I want you to actually take a moment to actually do some of the math. And there's two reasons for doing this. One is so that you can anticipate the kind of math, the kind of strategies that the students are going to be able to use. And then 2, so you can pair up those strategies and the ways kids might interact with the problem to the curriculum. And what I mean by that is, okay, so let's say you give this and you get 5 different ways of doing it from different kids. How do I know, like, which ones are actually doing it at, say, a grade 5 level or at a grade 4 level? And it's important for you to anticipate that so you can recognize the strategy students are using, and then, try and move them to use more difficult strategies, or have a better understanding, or move them along the continuum of concepts with the material you're working on. So I'd like Colin, please, to set the timer again, please, for 5 minutes. And I just want to give you 5 minutes. You can work on this problem, and maybe try and solve it 3 different ways, or think of 3 different ways students might try and solve it. And then if you still have some time left, you could take a look at, how would you use the same concept and make it easier or more difficult, more challenging for different students? How would you extend it or modify it? So I'm just going to change the side just for a minute to, if you finished solving the problem a few ways, can you consider, does this problem have multiple entry points for kids at different levels? Could it be used for more than one grade? Could it be modified? And what strategies might students use? And as you come up with a strategy, I can see that we've got one strategy already in the chat box. Calendar, thank you. So you're noticing a pattern could be found in different solutions. If anyone else had an idea for a parallel task or a strategy students might be using to answer this question, just type it in there. Okay, so in terms of it having multiple entry points, I'm seeing a variety of strategies here that show me that there are multiple entry points. You've got sort of people that might be recognizing a pattern and perhaps recording their answers in a chart and actually identifying using their algebra knowledge that the pattern is length is decreasing by 2 and width increasing by 2. You might have students that are using manipulatives only to discover the solution, and that would be a grade 4 acceptable strategy, because the grade 4s are to be, investigating the relationship between side lengths and rectangle and its perimeter and area, but they can use manipulatives and everything to solve the problem. By grade 5, they're determining the formula, determining the relationship. So if they're using the formula, they might be at the end of the grade 5 unit, and they're actually starting to use a more standardized way of recording it. And you might want to, if you're teaching a grade 5 class, move those students who are only using manipulatives to a more, helping them discover the relationship and start to use an algorithm. And by grade 6, they're still reinforcing that relationship, and they're starting to use the formulas more regularly. Okay, you've got people that are extending I'm just reading through the chat here, extending the numbers, so you could put 2 parallel problems and have easier numbers and harder numbers. Somebody might be, only needing to use the number 12 or 8 or something like that. You've got Lisa saying that the visual learners will draw a diagram. Ray's said grid paper, sketches, geoboards, measuring tapes. There's all sorts of ideas you guys have on here of ways that students might be answering the problem. At the end of this, I want to come back to some of the ways we might start to show make visible the kind of learning and the strategies that our students are using. And you might think about keeping a chart paper in your classroom with some of the strategies that students have for solving the problem, and put some of the students' examples up on a chart paper to keep track of all the different strategies we have. And if you organize it from, easiest to more complex, you might encourage students to, okay, you're really good at this strategy, why don't you try the next one up? It's a little bit, more challenging, and keep going. We've got the use of T-charts, excellent. Models, physical models are great. I love the idea of, Shawnee, of the kinesthetic learners using the tiles in the gym for creating perimeter or area, which is great. So definitely this problem could be used for more than one grade. It can be modified, and there's a lot of different strategies that students could use. And in these strategies, we see links to other curriculum strands. So we've got algebra links here. I put this grid up, not that it represents the problem, but just to take a look back. I forget who it was who mentioned the array model. What we're looking at with area is actually the array model of multiplication. So if you can link for the kids to the fact that when we're doing multiplication, some of the strategies that they might be using are repeated addition. So for this model here on this slide, you've got 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3, or 4 plus 4 plus 4. That sort of repeated addition is one model of multiplication. You also might have them starting to chunk it into easier groups for them to figure out. So if you had 32, you might do the groups of 10 and then add the 2 extra. I don't know, whatever. You're going to have kids that have different ways of doing their multiplication, and I think it's important when you're doing area to actually make it explicit to them that this is multiplication that they're working on. I love more suggestions in here. You guys are awesome. So I'd like to ask each group to find 2 different dimensions and compare the answers with each other. So find perhaps 2 different answers and compare and see. And a really good consolidation question always is to say, okay, look at all the answers you've got. Which one is most reasonable for the task at hand? Because if it's a farmer's area that they're making for planting, are they going to want a really long, skinny field or planting area? Are they going to want, sorry, it's for goats. I forgot. I've got lots of problems here. But are they going to want a really long, skinny pen? Are they going to want one that minimizes the fencing? You're taking a look at the realistic applications here and which one is going to be most cost effective and which one's going to be better for the goats. Okay? All right, so for split grades, I think we've kind of answered this question in that you can, even using one problem, you can modify it to have more difficult numbers or easier numbers. You also are taking a look at the strategies the students are using. So if they're in grade 6 and they're still using an area model only where they're counting up the grid squares, they need to be encouraged to move on to some other strategies to actually be performing at grade level. And it becomes more difficult sometimes to do split grades when you're taking a look at some of the questions, perhaps where some students need to do triangles and parallelograms, some students just need to do rectangles, but that's where you put the same kind of question up and have people working on different problems, but overall maybe looking at the same, which one is most efficient, or which one is, or what's the relationship between different things, that sort of thing. Okay? Does anybody have any other questions or concerns around split grade planning? Feel free to write it in the chat box. We can come back to this if you want to. I think the more you dive into the curriculum and really focus on those concepts like the relationship or the justification of which unit you're going to use to measure something, then you can make the question itself more difficult or a different kind of polygon for the students, but still meet have them all working on a similar thing while meeting the specific needs of the grade. Okay, the last activity I want you to do, which requires a link, is to actually go to the Guide to Effective Instruction and take a look at pages 31 to 39. Now, can I get Colin to put the link in again for this? And we don't need to read the whole thing, but what I want to do is actually ask you right now to mark either with a check mark or an X if you're familiar with the Guides to Effective Instruction. So have you seen these documents before? Have you used them? Good. Lots of people have seen them or used them. Excellent. So Colin's just put the link for the PDF, and you can scroll down in it to page 31. Most people are checking that they have seen it, which is great. But what I don't know. I know I started using these and dipping in and out of them, and I started using the problems. So the back section of the resource is basically problems, and sometimes there are problems that are reflecting one of the strands, like in measurement, taking a look at some of the specific expectations that you want, and sometimes they're missed. But in the front section, there's always a discussion of some of the bigger concepts. So if you're taking a look at page 31 to 39, and I don't know if there's anybody that's having trouble seeing it, but basically it goes over the measurement relationships. It gives you an overview, and it takes you step by step through how you might go about developing formulas from the student experience. And I found, as Ray has said, these are excellent for long-range plans because the specifications are listed, and it really gives you the background behind the concepts that you're trying to teach. And I must say that these transformed my teaching practice, and I always go through them, either this or the van der Waal or the Marion Small Making Math Meaningful for Canadian Students, because it gives me the background behind the concepts. Not just the procedures of, area equals length times width, but how actually am I going to teach students to do the investigations, to find out some of the stuff themselves, or to give targeted instruction on manipulative or targeted instruction on different strategies so that students can start to do it themselves. So yes, Joanne said it's the PDF page 33, but the document page 31 is what I'm talking about. So there are some, Crystal, for grades 1 to 3, and if you do Google them, there's various ways you can get to a link, but we'll try and put that up on the OTS, or Colin will, hopefully. Thank you, Colin. I find that the K to 6 ones, the 4 to 6 ones are a little bit better organized from my way to thinking, because those are the ones that I started with. The kindergarten or the K to 3 ones are differently organized, but I'm sure if you got into them, you would get used to the organization pretty quickly. So Colin, I think you're saying they're on EduGames for grade 7 and 8. Is that what you're saying for?
Oh, sorry, no. I was referring to the other ones, the link that I just put on there, the K to 3 ones. There's not 7 and 8 ones that I'm aware of. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, grade 7 and 8 teachers. Tips only for grade 7 and 8. So I'm just going to give people a minute just to take a look through this if you haven't. Okay, so basically I kind of tried to go through what are the important things I want to get across in when you're starting to plan a math activity. And number one is, as many of you have also known, starting with the curriculum is really important, and trying to make sure you understand the continuum, not just your grade, but what is the continuum of concepts that are being developed. And when you start to look at multiple grades, you start to see how it gets refined, how it becomes more complicated, complex, but also the themes that stay the same throughout, like justifying the use of your unit for measurement. The second challenge then is to find some places to get good problems. And I've introduced you to a few. You guys have given me great things to go to next as well. But once you get those problems, it's important to actually do the math yourself and to recognize in that math what variety of strategies the kids might come up with, what are the strategies you want to try and facilitate the kids using, and how does that relate to the curriculum. And this front matter of the Guide to Effective Instruction really helps you. It's one source to help you get a handle on that if it's not something you're used to. And I certainly know it's not the way I learned math, and I've had to learn it as a teacher in order to be able to teach it myself. So I want to basically finish off with a few other things that are in my mind when I'm planning and when I'm working with students. And at the very beginning, a few of you said, you know, you really need to figure out where the students are, where they are in their thinking. And there's an excellent document that is, I just have it in front of me here, it's a capacity building series. It's called Asking Effective Questions, and Colin's just put the link in there in the chat box. I've just chosen some of the questions that are my favorites for asking when I go around and I'm interacting with students that are doing problem solving. Number one, if I had to ask one question, it was like, what are you thinking? Instead of doing the old practice I had of talking too much and seeing what the students were doing and trying to do a little mini teaching when I went around with them working, trying to get them to explain to me what they're thinking, because sometimes they're solving a problem in a way I'd never thought of. And it has never failed that when I do the same question with students, somebody does it in a different way or comes up with a different twist. What do you think you might do next? How have you shown your thinking? How do you know what you've come up with? You know, just how do you know? How do you know that's the answer? Maybe relating it, how is this like something you know you have done before? Sorry, there's a typo though, that you have done before. Those are just some of the questions that I try and ask when I'm working with students to find out, instead of giving them a diagnostic tool perhaps, or in addition to giving them a diagnostic tool, just to find out where they are in their thinking as they're going along. There's another monograph, which is from the What Works Research into Practice, which gives some really brilliant guidelines to what you want to encourage the students to do themselves when they're talking about math. Okay, so not just what you're doing, the questions you're asking, which they can ask each other as well, but it gives prompts for them, and I've turned this into a kind of a poster that I'm going to share with you in a minute, but I'll just show you quickly and then come back. It's hard to read on here, but Colin will put a link to, I've got this on a site too. Basically, it goes through what you want the student to do, some prompts that they might use, and you know what they're actually doing. So you want to encourage students to explain their thinking, to agree with each other and give the reasons why they agree, or disagree with someone else and give the reason, to build on something somebody else has said, to go beyond what they're thinking or what somebody else is thinking, and also to teach them to use wait time in waiting for somebody's answer. And I love Lisa's comment there that math journals you can use math journals to have students explain and agree or disagree with reason, to build on all those sorts of things. These would work as prompts for journals as well. But in this case, this article is about and the title I love, is Student Interaction in the Math Classroom, Stealing Ideas or Building Understanding. And I love that, the idea that you can take somebody else's idea, but then do something with it, not just take it, but build on it or disagree with it or go beyond it. So this is the poster I just made up based on that, and it's got the information at the bottom, and Colin's put the link for this. I think an important thing to consider is when you're responding to student work, as I said before, you need to understand where the different strategies fit with the curriculum and the fact that there are more than one way to do any problem. I know traditionally, in my experience, I've come across a lot of grade 4 teachers, and myself when I first started, who were doing area and perimeter and just automatically taught the procedural way of doing it with, here's the algorithm, this is how you do it, and then people will go do it, rather than focusing on the conceptual understanding of what perimeter and area is or are, and how to figure them out using manipulatives. So making sure you use one of these kinds of resources to understand the conceptual underpinning behind the continuum in the curriculum, so that you can respond to the student work and encourage them to move beyond, or to try a different strategy, or to just reinforce their thinking, that sort of thing. And Neru's asked me, can I go back to this one? I hope this is the one you mean. So this is the poster for that comes from the monograph that Colin put a link to. Student Interaction in the Math Classroom, Stealing Ideas or Building Understanding. And it's just in a sidebar, and I turned it into a poster so that I could put it up for my students to encourage them to use prompts when we're having math talks. Okay? And there's a link to that Colin just put in. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, so I alluded to this chart earlier, or this slide earlier, just in terms of making learning visible to students. You probably want to consider capturing some of the strategies that the students use in charts, anchor charts that keep around the room, so that they know what are the strategies that I could use? What are the strategies somebody else is using? And for example, if, when you're talking about area, students could be counting each square. They could be skip counting. They could be grouping and doing repeated adding, or they could do multiplying. They could do splitting, where they're taking a look at a big number and splitting it into smaller numbers to multiply together and then add. And I found it important to keep a hold of those so the students have access to them and can keep working, maybe trying a different strategy the next time. Strategies for organizing work, like charts, diagrams, are good things to have up on your wall. Benchmark measures for measurement, especially for the younger grades, but going on too, for what could we use that would be a good estimate of a centimeter or a meter or whatever you're looking at. Word walls with mathematical concepts or definitions. Those guidelines for talking would be good to have up on your walls. And then comes one of the biggest ideas that I learned from the Marion Small Making Math Meaningful book, but it's elsewhere as well, which is talking about misconceptions. And I think the idea of learning from mistakes is an important one, to really get excited when kids make mistakes and you talk it through, because it's from those misconceptions that really is showing that they're learning and having growth. And I just want you to think and add any misconceptions that you are aware of. It doesn't have to be in measurement, but if you want to add your own to that blank page there, please go ahead. One of the ones I'm thinking about is every year when I teach perimeter, there are some students who still have the misconception that perimeter is the squares that you lay around the outside of a shape, rather than the linear measurement going around a shape. So you imagine you're trying to find the perimeter of a rectangle. You're talking about the actual centimeter length going around the whole perimeter, rather than putting area model of squares around the outside. And I like Shawnee's comments that I think you're talking about the misconceptions are great for congressional or congressing, or I think what you mean is the consolidating at the end of when you're taking a look at a problem, really coming and making a point of talking about those misconceptions. And this is something that I've kept on a chart in the classroom where we just keep track of the misconceptions. And there's something we celebrate and as excellent markers that we're learning as a class. Trying to think, there's quite a few examples where, people have a misconception, say with fraction, about what the top number and the bottom number are. That's another misconception. I don't know, I'm not coming up with very many right now, but you can add some to the chat group if you have any other misconceptions you can think of. So the next thing I want to talk about is basically the idea of metacognition and my learning being my learning as a teacher as well as my learning as a student or the student's own learning. One of the ways that I've started to take a look at this is to start talking about what are the barriers to my learning, what are the changes needed so I can learn, and what are the things that help. And I did this with a class one year, and the kids identified all sorts of barriers to their learning. One of them was the fact that they found getting feedback very stressful. Another one was that some kids liked better working individually, and some liked working in groups. And we started making a list as a class of all the barriers to their learning and then the things that really helped their learning, like being able to talk it through or being able to get the instructions twice. So that I would tell everybody, explain the problem, and then they had the opportunity to come and talk to me again and have me re-explain it in a smaller group so that they didn't feel stressed about it. And even knowing that they could do that, when we changed our practice so they could have that opportunity, that reduced their stress enough that they actually were able to pay attention to the instructions the first time and didn't need me to repeat the instructions. So we did this as a class, and from that, my students started to join me on changing our practice as a group. Me changing my practice as a teacher, them changing their practice as a learner, and we started doing sort of action research together. And I ended up getting students to the point where they were able to identify their own barriers to their learning in terms of learning skills, and they were taking planning action and deciding on what action they wanted to take themselves. And I would like to ask Colin if he could play a little clip of my students who, at the end of their action research, were able to talk about, well, actually it was midpoint through, they were able to talk about what their barriers to learning were and what they were planning to do to improve their learning. Colin, are you able to take over?
Yeah, I am going to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what's called a web tour, and it's going to be a YouTube video, and it's going to come up in this main screen now, and it should come up and automatically play for you. If it doesn't automatically play in the screen, I'll also put a link in the chat, and you can click that and open it up in a browser. But sometimes if you get them both going, just be careful. If you get them both going, you'll hear like echoes and stuff, but that just usually means because you've got two of them going on your own computer. So here is the first one coming up in the main screen there, I hope. And you can just simply watch it, and I'll put the link in the chat too.
So I just turned my microphone off there because it was echoing the first time. Basically, my students came up with that based on me asking them for their feedback on how math was going for them. So I asked them for feedback to me, and what somebody's written up here as a barrier, fear of being judged, and things that help our safe space, that came out in group after group. So that the students each identified what they felt were individual barriers, and then they got into a group, and I didn't tell them what was going to be the solution. They came up with the solutions themselves. So the idea that they needed to go over the instructions again in a small group. And as I said, even knowing that they could do that reduced them needing to do it. Some of them, there was a group of them that had focus in getting distracted as being one of their barriers to learning. And so they worked on doodling while listening, and they worked on all sorts of things to try and incorporate that. They were confident in reflecting on their own weaknesses, and we actually had a Skype conversation with some high school students, and the high school students had done a similar thing with their teacher, and they were blown away. They said to these grade 6 students, I can't believe that you figured this out at your age, and I'm now in grade 11, or I'm in grade 12, and I'm just figuring this out now. And it was an amazing validation of their learning. So I really would encourage you to get your students to do that kind of feedback. It sounds like it's putting yourself on the line and saying, what am I doing that's helping your learning? What are the barriers in this classroom that we need to change, or in working together? Yes, it's setting goals, and I actually used their quotes on the report card. So I used their next steps. I just quoted what they said, and I said, you know what, I agree with what they said about their own learning, and I agree that this is their next step, and then they did the final reflection on it at the end of the year. So they were writing their own learning skills, which was fabulous. So what I'm asking you to do, or what I'm promoting, is engaging your students as action researchers, and use the barriers they see as points for improving your practice and their own practice. Engage them in finding solutions to group work, accountability. Allow them to self-assess. Is it working? Are they learning? Model using your own mistakes and barriers as the best starting point for learning, and you'll get engaged students that are really solving problems that you bang your head about every year trying to solve. So we're coming up to the end, and I want to leave a little bit of chance here for some questions or anything. My intention was to basically give you some jumping in points to say, really starting with the curriculum, that continuum of concepts is important. Giving some ideas of some resources you might use. You guys have your own awesome suggestions that I'm going to take a look at as well. Giving you some jumping off points for considering how to look at student work, where to go to find out what the concepts are behind the student work, and how to incorporate student voice and action research. I'm also hoping that what I've presented came across as authentic and a safe thing, and not too overwhelming. I heard, somebody said up earlier, there's so much to cover. It's really, it does become overwhelming. And I think going deeper is the answer. I think that was what someone had suggested there. And I love the reflections there you're giving about those students. I mean, those students' voices, that's the best thing I could show you in terms of promoting this kind of teaching and including students as action researchers, because, you hear their confidence and how, they don't care. They're vulnerable. Their vulnerability is strength in terms of sharing where they are and where they're going to go next. So does anyone have any questions for us? Yes, fast and furious. Sorry, Joanne. I'm just going to look at what else. If you'd like on this page, just as an interactive thing, if you'd like to put in any learning points you have, and I'm glad it's overwhelming in a good way, Patricia. If there's any feedback you'd like to give, suggestions for cutting things out to make it, less overwhelming, that would be great. I love that comment, Lisa, about grade 4 to 6 students. I should have put some links in from a grade 11, 12 class doing very, very similar things. I think it took a little longer to get them to the point of being vulnerable, but it has been done in older grades as well. I think that question about how do you handle younger students who can't voice their barriers but are shutting down. I think that's a really tricky question. In my position now as a learning resource teacher, I do see that more often, and I think it's a slow and steady building trust and observing maybe more than listening, and seeing, you know, trying different things and trying to go the whole class approach to taking a look one by one at things that might help and trying them one by one. Like, for example, doing the think, pair, share before anybody shares, or having somebody else share a partner's ideas, all those sorts of things. Honoring the mistakes so that they believe it's safe to do it. And sharing your own mistakes so that they believe, you know, they have the trust that they can do that then. Tracy's comment about the 3-part math lesson, how often is it recommended? There are different opinions. I agree. And I think I found what I would do is present a 3-part lesson and then see what the students are coming up with, see where the points are, see where I need to do little mini lessons and that sort of thing. And I do think it's important to go between open-ended problems and then closed problems as well, because sometimes you just need a quick, even though you're going for conceptual understanding, you do need reinforcement of some of the procedures that students are learning. So I think balance is probably the best answer to that. And I think you'll find, as you say, there are different opinions and different resources, but I think people come back to that idea of balance between open and closed, between direct instruction and students investigating and coming up with answers themselves. Thank you for the lovely comments. I do, if you know, positive feedback is great too, but if you have any suggestions for improvement, I'm happy to hear those too. I'm going to leave my email address here. I think you probably already have it with some of the OTF information that came out, but if you want to send me any questions privately or any feedback, there's also an OTF feedback questionnaire that will come up as well. Shawnee, I like your comment about growth mindset. I think that's really, really important, and giving students authentic control over making a difference in their own learning allows them to see growth and allows them to see they have control over that growth. The Excel document is available to download if you go to either of those links through Google or the OneDrive one. There, you can open it in Excel. There should be a button or to download from Google, and you should be able to download it. I didn't put
yeah, and I also posted a link there on the OTF resources page that goes along with this webinar. It's just there as a straight file, so they can just download that file as an Excel file and have it themselves.
Okay. Someone just asked me about the 3-part lesson, and I could probably find, I don't have a hand right now, and I don't know if you do, Colin, any links, or maybe somebody else does, to more explanation about the 3-part lesson. And I could certainly find them, and if you email me, I'll email you back with some ideas. But basically what you're looking at is a quick minds-on activity to get kids thinking. A bigger problem that has at the heart of it basically a concept that you're working on. And it could be two parallel problems or more than that, and then a consolidation at the end to really come back to maybe it's looking at strategies that you were focusing on, or maybe you know, kids have the strategies but they're not explaining their thinking well enough. Or showing how they found the problem, or justifying their answers. So you might have a consolidation that focuses on that, or it could be consolidation with smaller groups. If one group needs help on justifying and another group has trouble with the concept, you know, that's sort of the idea of where you're going with the 3-part lesson. But we can get you more resources. I'm glad you have less concern about approaching split grade planning. That's good.
And Alexis and Tracy just posted links to PDF for three-part lesson and the educated videos. So that saves us looking them up. So I'll put all those links onto the OTF site that you'll get a link to as well when you get the link tomorrow to the recording and all that kind of stuff. So I think we're kind of wrapping up here. That's awesome. That was, oh my goodness, that was so cool, Kathy. I mean, I've got a lot of ideas for my senior science classes that I want to work on. So I'm going to thank you for that. I'm going to go over to the smiley face and give a little round of applause there for you, because that was very, very useful. And as the chat comes up here, everybody is doing that as well. So cool, perfect. So I think we've got the feedback link up here. If you click that, you'll be able to give feedback. The other thing, when you when you close down Blackboard Collaborate, you're going to get a pop-up that will take you to a Google form for some quick feedback. That's really, really useful, both for OTF and for Kathy as well, because Kathy gets all of that feedback as well. So you can post in there what you think, what you liked, well, how useful it was, all that kind of stuff. And one of the new things that OTF is doing this year is once you've completed the feedback survey, you get an option to print a certificate. So you get to get some credit for having attended the PD, so you get to print off a certificate for this session and add it to a portfolio or whatever that you do to keep track of those things. So people had asked for that, so OTF went ahead and did that. So the link, like I said, for the feedback is there, but it will also pop up. There's also a link here for more OTF sessions. If you look at this, there's all kinds of them going on all the time. If you go to the OTF website, to that calendar link, you'll see stuff coming up all the time. And if I can just point out one little one here, where's my button? Down here, on March 23rd, there's a Math Where Do I Begin Part 2 assessment with somebody named Kathy Griffin. And I'm sure that will be an amazing follow-up to this one, because I'm pretty sure that's what it's designed to be. So once again, I'm going to thank Kathy. I'm going to stop the recording. And if anybody has any last-minute things they would like to say or ask, we can definitely. Oh, I actually have one more piece. I forgot about that. We got the upcoming sessions. There's also money available as well. Siri would shoot me if I forgot to mention that. OTF has money through the ministry for additional qualifications courses in math and technology, and there's information on this website as well. So subsidies for taking ABQ courses and AQ courses on math and tech. So if that's something you're interested in, then you can go to that website there and take a look at more information. So stopping the recording.